I'm going to cover all of the syringe guns at once because they are very similar mechanically, with just some small differences in upsides and downsides between them. That way, I only have to do this opening section once. Let's get to it. All of the syringe guns fire 10 needles each second at a meager velocity of 990 hammer units per second. There aren't many projectiles in the game that are slower than this. Maybe uncharged stickies, but that's all I can think of. This is very different from the fast-moving single-shot style of Crusader's crossbow that most medics are used to, and the needles themselves do between 5 and 10 damage with a 20% extra ramp up at point-blank range. Here's a demonstration of where you can expect these different damage values. With this, they also have a decent amount of arc and spread, which, combined with the general slow speed of the weapon, can make it quite difficult to hit enemies not moving in a straight line. On paper, it looks like the maximum 100 to 120 DPS these things do provides some much-needed self-defense power for the medic. But combine the slow projectiles, spread, damage fall off, no passive reload, and the fact that the visual projectiles shot out of the weapon in no way match what is happening server side. Tunic made a great video demonstrating this, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. All of these small things add up to a class of weapon that just feels clunky and rough to use in a game where other weapons are generally very satisfying to shoot. But hey, at least these are some of the few projectiles that can't be reflected, so you don't have to suffer even more when fighting pyros. Now listen, I'll get to the explanations of how best to use these things and the differences between your three options in a moment. But let's address the elephant in the room first, the Crusader's crossbow. Come on, you knew it was coming. Because we all know that crossbow good, syringe guns bad, but there are still plenty of misguided players who believe the only reason syringe guns are bad is because of those usability issues of spread, speed, and actually manually needing to reload. This doesn't tell the full story. The gap between these weapons is not entirely a gap due to self-defense prowess, or lack thereof, but in utility. Fundamentally, a self-defense tool is not great for a medic, where you ideally want to avoid as many of these situations as possible. Contrast this with a weapon like crossbow that provides you with extra utility in things like ranged and burst healing that you can't achieve without it. Because of this, the uptime of these weapons is just not comparable at all. Simply explained, you are sometimes forced to make use of your syringe gun to survive, whereas you want to actively use your crossbow to bolster your impact. In any given game, even if you have a syringe gun equipped, since it doesn't heal, buff, or build uber, you will be trying to use it as little as possible in order to do the most you can on medic. You ideally don't want to even pull it out unless you're taking the game less seriously. The only way syringes can ever be good is if they hit a critical mass of damage or accuracy where a medic could semi-reliably defend himself and win 1v1s against power classes. And let's be honest, that would be very toxic for the overall game, as medic stacking would be a legit strat. So syringe guns don't really offer the medic anything useful that he wants to be doing, and instead offer a band-aid and unreliable solution for self-defense. And I already know that this is the point of the video where I may get some comments along the lines of, but my team theory, my team won't protect me, so I have to do it. This is going to be blunt, but it's the only way I could get this point across. If you regularly need to use a syringe gun to defend yourself, that's a skill issue. Not your team's skill, but yours. You probably need to improve your positioning, awareness, or both, because if you're getting caught out that often, there is clearly a problem there. In fact, I'll prove it to you. Let's see just how usable syringe guns are in comparison to crossbow. I recently played this game on Barn Blitz. We had another medic who was playing decently with the crossbow for most of the game to make up for the lost healing, and my team was overall losing many fights, potentially putting me in situations where I could need to defend myself. If there was any game where I should be able to make decent use of a syringe gun, it seems to be this one. But first, let's go through looking for scenarios where I could have arrowed a teammate. Here, I could have arrowed my heavy. This scout is standing still, waiting. Then I could have also healed up this pyro sooner. Could have gone for a clutch shot on the scout again. Scout standing still, being very patient. A couple of bows get this heavy back in the action. Arrowing this soldier before crit buffing my other players would have been a nice optimization. This is an arrow tank the heavy situation. Luckily, my other medic took care of it. Scout and heavy once again. Here there are like 3 players just begging for an arrow. Oh look, another situation where hitting any of these guys with a bow gets them back to full. Just look at them all. There's a good chance that hitting my demo with a bolt here saves his life. I am unable to commit to arrow tanking my heavy on the cart post uber to keep up the pressure. Just look at these health values. Multiple players here could use some juice. I'd also like to point out how I simply reposition to avoid encounters with enemies when my team is dead like this. Once again, my other medic needs to pick up my slack. I most likely could have arrowed this damage away instead of popping mega heal to save the heavy. Arrow tanking does wonders here as well. Imagine if I just could have saved one of these soldiers. And that was the game. There were probably more times I could have used the crossbow, but these are all the obvious ones to me. Now let's see where I made use of my trusty syringe guns this game. Here, I smartly avoided the fight with the full health soldier and tried but failed to find a spy with my overdose. This pyro runs at me and I do 18 damage before my Engie cleans him up. By the way, a bow would have killed him quicker here. I finish off this spy after he stabs my spy. Oh wait, that's literally it. I never even switched to my syringe gun on defense because I was actually positioning well and backing out as my team lost ground. And if you factor in the 2 post-round deaths, I only died twice throughout the entire game and still managed 24,000 healing in about 16 minutes. Games like this were not uncommon for me when trying to make this video. This is why you're going to see a lot of questionable decisions around fights and positioning in the background. I just had to start clip farming. Now, I'm not going to say that we win this game if I'm using a crossbow instead. My team was pretty outclassed, but it probably would have been a little closer, which is a huge problem. I want you to realize that even in a game where your team is being farmed and you're losing, crossbow can help equalize things, while syringe guns still do next to nothing if your awareness is good. And when you're already winning, crossbow also helps you keep up the pressure so you can win even more. You simply should never need to win a 1v1 as medic in the first place. And one thing I never see mentioned with these weapons is how many of these 1v1 self-defense situations you put yourself in by not using the crossbow. How many teammates could you have saved, or fights could have been won by a clutch bolt, so you didn't need to try to escape or fight the player who just killed your pocket with your syringe gun? Have you ever stopped to think, how many players could I have saved by hitting an arrow if I didn't have one of these things equipped? Say your soldier decides to fight their soldier, but mid-engagement their soldier gets arrowed for 90 health while all you have is the measly 24 health per second of beam. I'm sorry, but it's going to be very hard for your soldier to win, and if he loses, I guess you're stuck trying to defend yourself from the guy that just killed him. By using these so-called self-defense weapons, you are inadvertently creating the very problem you are aiming to solve. Even when it comes to 1v1s, syringe guns aren't exactly the end-all be-all. Kind of like the Uber-saw, they do vastly more against bad players, since hitting these projectiles on a player that can actually strafe well is not easy. But at least the saw gives you uber charge, something medics can never get enough of in their kits. Against a good soldier, you're probably either hitting a surf or getting 2-rocketed anyway. Against a scout that has any semblance of movement and aim, you're pretty much never winning. But sure, you can Blutsauger down the WM1 Pyro playing with a controller. Never mind how you even let that player get into flamethrower range in the first place. So what? You're equipping one of these options so you can sometimes get away with a kill against bad enemies instead of just positioning better, being way more useful to your team, and having a noticeably larger impact with the bow. If you can't tell by now, I'm not a fan of these weapons. I generally dislike any strategy, if you can call it that, for medic that boils down to hope the player you're fighting is bad at the game and you get away with more than you should have. I tend to value consistent strategies instead. And the Crusaders is just so good and so synonymous with medic at this point that you'll be constantly disappointing your teammates by not being able to arrow them. So unfortunately, the best way to use a syringe gun is to never use it. Again, most of the time I had to go out of my way to get these clips. I wasn't exactly always playing seriously. If I was actually trying to play medic properly and win the game, I was just playing beam simulator since I should be avoiding basically all engagements. So I hate to burst your bubble right off the bat, but legitimately defending these weapons is likely both a skill and mindset problem you have. The crossbow is not overrated, and syringe guns certainly aren't underrated. I could go on about the tempo your team loses by not getting those burst heals, or the fact that high health pool classes become essentially impossible to get back into the fight without crit heals. Seriously, you expect me to spend the next 4 seconds doing nothing but beaming my 100 health soldier when an arrow gets him back to full almost instantly? And don't even get me started on healing heavies without a crossbow. But I think I've said enough. Look at how fast I am. I'm coming, medic! If only I had something that could heal him at range, but too bad that doesn't exist. We can move on to what you actually can do with these weapons. Just keep in mind throughout this video that the most significant downside of using a syringe gun is not the text listed in red. It's the fact that you don't have the Crusader's crossbow equipped instead. But alright, this is a syringe gun video after all, so I promise I won't bring up Crusaders again. And as much truth as there was in that crash out, using the syringe guns in moderation did have some charm to it. I was also more aware of my positioning and potential threats since I didn't have anything better to do, at least when I wasn't just messing around. All right, I'm locking in. You think I'm scared of you just because you're getting crits? And little bro just got clipped and put in the syringe gun video. How does it feel? Starting things off with stock, it isn't pretty, guys. There isn't really a world you would use this weapon outside of the funny, haha, 2007 medic meme. The other syringe guns have upsides that are, as a whole, greater than the downsides associated with them. Those upsides also usually offer a bit of fun and flavor to the weapon as well, so there really isn't a decent reason to equip this thing. The best I can offer here is a few tips on actually aiming and hitting your syringe gun needles before moving on to the upsides and downsides of Blutsauger and Overdose. needles. When I first equipped these weapons and started gathering clips, I was not great at aiming them. For me, I was almost giving them too much credit. I was not compensating enough for how slow the projectiles are and the arc they have. So I basically started aiming both higher and further ahead of where my target was strafing, and boom, all of the sudden needles were connecting. That and completely ignoring where the needles on my screen were going, and instead more feeling it out, because again, the way they interact with ping is not very helpful to say the least. When enemies are moving in a straightish line, that's all well and good, but I found that the unreliability of aiming these reared its head as soon as my opponents didn't see me as a completely free kill and actually moved around and dodged. Suppose you're fighting a faster class and they are moving unpredictably. In that case, you essentially enter a guessing game since you need to aim so far ahead of where the player model currently is while not knowing where they will actually be in the next half second. It's not impossible, and good prediction and tracking can sometimes make up for this, but it still significantly hinders reliability. The good news is, if I can call it that, is that if your opponent is strafing around and dodging, you might be able to increase your distance from them as you fire while you backpedal away. And while you backpedal, don't forget to press A and D to not only help dodge some shots, but also somewhat mitigate the slight debuff to speed while walking backwards. It works, trust me. You'll also probably hit most of your syringes while backpedaling on enemies chasing you. That way they are walking into them. At only 990 hammer units per second, the compensation and aim needed for your syringes to actually catch up to an enemy running away from you is quite significant and makes it very difficult to land these things. So enemies running into them is usually your best bet. With this, if you can cut a corner or break line of sight, spamming that corner or doorway is probably the easiest way to make an enemy chasing you eat a face full of needles, since they not only can't see you firing, but small chokes don't allow for the same amount of strafing and dodging. I'll also throw in a little tip about auto call. This setting causes teammates to automatically call for medic based on a health threshold you set. If you have your auto call set to 99% like I do, or just a number very high, then disguise spies taking any form of damage will cause them to call out for a medic. Even just a little chip damage from a needle. It's not quite on the same level as the actual hit sound you get from the other medic primary, but it does let you spam a few syringes at someone to confirm if they're a spy or not. You see that, chat? That's how I know he's a spy. If you have auto call on and you shoot a single syringe into an enemy spy and your auto call set to 99% like mine is, then as soon as that syringe connects, they'll call out like that. Actually, OP strat. Let's talk about bigger and somewhat better things. The Blutsauger. The Blutsauger instantly heals you for 3 health when you hit a needle on an enemy at the cost of 2 health regenerated per second. Let me use this weapon as an example of why independently testing these things is so important. The Blutsauger runs into the same annoying combination of text as the VIta-saw. It has an active upside that only works when using the weapon, in exchange for a completely passive downside that arguably makes you easier to kill all of the time. I mean, -2 health regen sounds terrible considering medic starts at a base of 3 health per second and scales up to 6 when out of combat. Nerfing that to only 1 health each second would have dire consequences, especially when it comes to surviving spam damage in chokes or afterburn. Reading the text as is, you may think that the Blutsauger takes you from the standard 3 to 6 health per second down to 1 to 4, and if it did, it would certainly be terrible. But in reality, it's not that bad because the health regen negative actually scales just like medic's normal regen does. It starts at a small half a health reduction, then scales up to -2, changing your overall regen to 2.5 to 4. And while the large disparity of almost 12 seconds to full heal doesn't paint a kind picture, the difference seen is mainly due to the healing capping out at 4 health per second compared to the usual 6 when out of combat. But if you are out of combat, you're probably going to be beaming a player, which will double your base regen. Thankfully, the Blutsauger's negative applies after the doubling from healing a damaged player, taking your base health regen to 5.5, scaling all the way to 10. This cuts that disparity in time to full health down to only 2.5 seconds between having the weapon equipped and not. Let's look at this negative in another familiar context for medic players: afterburn from flares. Flare guns apply 7.5 seconds of afterburn, dealing 8 damage a second for a total of 60 damage. Without the Blutsauger, you regen 3 per second because you're never getting scaled regen while on fire and taking damage constantly, which will offset this 60 damage down to 37.5, probably rounded up to 38. With the Blutsauger, you're looking at 41 damage from that afterburn instead, only a 3 or 4 health difference depending on how the rounding applies. If you have a hurt teammate to beam, the 4 health difference remains, but the total damage you take is only 15 without Blutsauger and 19 with it. That 3 to 4 health technically could make a difference, but those situations are going to be extremely few and far between. I have never felt the reduced regen in the same way you sometimes notice the 10 missing health from VIta-saw, and these numbers make it clear why. In every situation outside of regenerating naturally without healing a damaged teammate, the difference is kind of negligible. Unlike Vita, I never managed to get a single clip where I was sure the Blutsauger's negative got me killed, and in any engagement, usually hitting 2 or 3 needles already puts you in the positive for health compared to not having it equipped. Let's talk about that. How much extra health can you expect as a return on your investment in using this thing? Theoretically, if you hit every shot, you're adding 30 extra health per second to your base of 2.5 for the 4 seconds you can fire before you need to reload. That technically almost doubles your health pool from 150 to 280. But let's be honest, if you're playing against an opponent that lets you just pin cushion them for 4 seconds straight, you probably never needed that health in the first place. Based on my playing, I think a realistic number is hitting about a third to half your syringes overall. More on slower classes like soldiers and heavy, but definitely less on scouts and such. That gives you an average 10 to 15 health per second for those 4 seconds, or 40 to 60 total health. That still is not insignificant. There were times when the health on hit came in clutch and saved me. I can't deny that. Of course, most of those times, I was the one who put myself in such a precarious situation in the first place, and even then, those were the vast minority of circumstances, but it can make that difference. I tend to believe that against the good players you should be worried about, the extra health is less likely to make such a difference. You won't get those 4 seconds of spamming needles when the scout beat shots you twice, or you get sync bombed, or you get sticky piped. Good players will still farm you, but I digress. It's fun to heal while you do damage. And in terms of actually winning a 1v1 as medic, the extra health does give Blutsauger the clear advantage over the other syringe guns. Oh my. It's a bit of a Blutsauger difference there, chat, not gonna lie. Let's talk Overdose. The Overdose gives you a movement speed boost while active at the cost of 15% damage. Interestingly, due to damage falloff and rounding, that minus 15% doesn't always translate to 15% less DPS. You lose about 1 damage per syringe until you get really close, then it does 2 less damage. That means proportionally, it loses more damage overall at both point blank and long ranges, while the DPS reduction isn't quite as noticeable in the mid range. The rate of move speed is an extra 1% for every 5% uber charge you have, capping out at a 20% boost with full uber. It also gives a 0.5 hammer unit speed increase even at 0% charge. So hey, it'll let you run back to the front lines a microsecond faster. This potential 20% move speed stacks with other move speed buffs, letting you run frighteningly fast at times.
Get your conch, buddy. Oh, I need this. I need this. Please have the conch ready. Yes! Yes! Ooh! Oh my gosh, I'm so moving. That was awesome.
Another interesting quirk of the Overdose is that the move speed bonus snapshots your current uber when you switch to the weapon. So if you switch to the Overdose while popping, you'll get the speed bonus for whatever percent your uber was right when you swapped until you switch back, even as your uber drains with the Overdose out. This can actually come into play, but I'll leave that for when we talk about the Mediguns. This syringe gun is the slight exception to my rant at the beginning because it does give utility. Movement speed is something medic loves. Just see how great it is to beam a scout or demo knight where you inherit their speed. Now a medic can achieve similar levels of speed without even having a teammate nearby. Fantastic, right? The biggest issue is that the Overdose needs to be active for you to move faster, meaning you're giving up on building, healing, or buffing. You know, the things you actually want to be doing 99% of the time. As a result, Overdose is similarly relegated, like all syringe guns, to a weapon you switch to when you need to in order to survive. I guess you can use it to cross sightlines a bit faster and move unpredictably if you really want to. But if you have enough charge to move that quickly, I'd recommend in the vast majority of circumstances you don't ever peek that sightline unless it's to use through. But credit where credit is due. The Overdose can let you escape certain situations more easily. Yeah, I'm running, dude. Should have had the Overdose, buddy. Should have had the Overdose. In these scenarios you may need it, move speed can be quite nice, especially since you spend a lot of time backpedaling while shooting these weapons. There are a couple of important thresholds to be aware of. Medic runs at a base speed of 320 hammer units per second. There is a penalty of 10% speed while backpedaling, taking Medic down to 288 hammer units per second. This is why it can be so hard to escape pyros or spies once they're already on you. As I said before, strafing with A or D actually removes this move speed penalty, but it's not like you're all of the sudden now moving back at 320 hammer units. Since you've changed your direction to be more diagonal instead of a straight line, you still aren't moving away from your enemy quite as fast as if you turn your back and held W, but it will take you back to about 300 hammer units per second. Enter the Overdose. With only 21% Uber, you'll start outpacing those pyros while backpedaling and filling them with needles. At 56%, the same goes for spies. It's beautiful watching those trick stab happy spies become completely helpless, as now they can't close the distance on you outside of things like the big earner. Getting backstabbed with the Overdose equipped and high Uber is honestly a skill issue. In fact, it becomes nigh impossible for any class to land a successful melee when you're at high percent, and you can even hunt down helpless players yourself.
100%. Now I'm fully utilizing my speed bonus. What is that, a Crusaders? Oh, you're not with the time? Oh, you're trying to melee me? You can't melee an Overdose user?
All right, we're gonna have to hit a fatty surf to get out of this one, chat. Or we just walk. Never mind. Never mind, dude. Bro, you think you can escape? I got the Overdose, baby! Outside of these specific class matchups, I'm sure there might also be some jumps on specific maps that a little extra move speed enables, but I'm not enough of an Overdose connoisseur to know much about that specifically. When it comes to comparing the Blutsauger to the Overdose, I have to give the slight edge to the Overdose. At the end of the day, the move speed it gives is some extra utility, even though you need to give up everything else you want to be doing by making the weapon active to get it. And while it can be a toss-up depending on the scenario, if someone were to ask me what I'd rather have going into a forced 1v1 as med, plus 40 or so health, or 20% movement speed, I'm probably taking the movement speed basically every time. Additionally, to even get the health from Blut, you have to hit the enemy, meaning you're basically committing to the fight. Whereas with the Overdose, you have the option to fight or run or surf away. The real caveat is that the upside of the Overdose is contingent on having a decent amount of Ubercharge percent, while the Blutsauger is more consistent in that regard. That's how I see it. Now, let's go over the Mediguns. I didn't do this with Stock and Blutsauger because they don't interact with Ubercharge the same way Overdose does, so it's largely irrelevant to the discussion. I will say that Syringe Guns in general feel slightly better overall on Quick Fix and Kritzkrieg since they are more aggressive and prone to having your pocket die. With Overdose specifically, I find it definitely works best on Quick Fix and Crits. Both of these Mediguns build faster than Stock, letting you reach those aforementioned speed thresholds sooner. On Crits, you generally prioritize building faster as well, and the Quick Fix's extra healing very minorly makes the other option in your primary slot a tiny bit less necessary. During either of these Ubers, your pocket can potentially die, so that snapshotting mechanic can let you get out of dodge if you don't have another teammate nearby to give the rest of your charge to. It's very niche, but at least it's a possibility. You might think that the Overdose would pair nicely with the Vaccinator since it builds Uber the fastest, but the charge system of that weapon means you also use Uber the fastest, and are rarely in that 50+% range where the move speed starts becoming super noticeable. You also end up in this weird situation where if you don't have any percentage, you don't have any bonus speed to help you. But if you do have some percentage, it's basically always better to pop some bubbles in order to survive rather than run away with the Overdose outs. They just don't synergize too well together. In fact, usability like this is often an issue with the Overdose in general. It should be common practice to play less aggressively on med the closer you get to reaching 100%, since getting that charge is often the single best thing you can do for your team, then only flipping into aggressive mode once you're ready to pop. Which means as you start to stack up your movement speed, you start positioning in a manner where moments to make use of it become less likely. Ironically, I think a reverse Overdose that gave more speed at low Uber and scaled backward as you got charged would legitimately be better. You could use it to run away more easily post Uber, for example. And with any Syringe Gun, I think the choice of melee really doesn't have any competition at all. You might think that if you're defending yourself anyway, the Uber-saw would be a great choice. It even has synergy with the Overdose, giving you some bonus move speed for successfully landing a swing. In the same vein, the VIta-saw can let you spawn in with some overcharge. Then you can run back to the front lines much faster. But then you'd be using the VIta-saw, so yeah. Or you could even run the amputator, at least giving you some way to bolster your healing outside of your Medigun. But seriously, the Solemn Vow just feels so good with any syringe gun. Being able to see the exact health value of your attacker when defending yourself lets you make an informed decision about committing to a fight, trying to surf, or simply running away. Syringe guns are aimed at helping you defend yourself, and Vow is undeniably the best melee for doing that and potentially winning those 1v1s. Plus, being able to see a low health enemy and run them down with Overdose move speed, while rarely optimal, is just a straight up good time. And that really is the simple story of the syringe guns. Rarely optimal. Even with the extra utility from the Overdose, using it to reposition often is most likely just a positioning or awareness skill issue that can be overcome outside of incredibly rare scenarios. The opportunity cost of using these things is just too severe. The syringe guns are a backup plan for situations you're always trying to avoid on medic, and they're not exactly a great plan at that. But if you insist on using one, Godspeed. And when you feed, at least you'll be feeding with pride.
Bro, we got so many power classes out here. Whoa, get this guy away from me. Oh!